Hi kids, Lisa here with another hashtag Tarot of the Wet Hair with day 15. Today is Temperance in my 78-day journey through this incredible spiritual tool, this incredible mandala, this lexicon of archetype and symbol, the tarot. So today I'm focusing on Temperance, and the deck I've chosen to feature is Elizabeth Josephine Gill's out-of-print deck. Sorry to all of you who hate being tempted with out-of-print decks. This one's a little bit hard to come by too because it can be real spendy on eBay. But nonetheless, beautiful deck, the Gill Tarot. And Elizabeth Gill chooses to use, she has keywords on all of her cards, not just the titles for the trumps, but all the cards have keywords. And she's chosen here temporare, which is the Latin root of the word temperance. And the temporare is a verb. It means to combine properly. It means to mingle. And that mingling is deeply ensconced in the historical imagery of this deck. Now don't be distracted by the boobies in the Dodal Tarot. There are a lot of boobies in the Dodal Tarot, but don't be distracted. This imagery, consistently calling forth the fact that temperance is the fourth of the four cardinal virtues. Three of those four appear in the trumps. The one that's missing is prudence. As I suggested in my discussion of the Hermit, early versions of the Hermit show the old man with an hourglass, and people in the 18th century and other commentators have thought of the Hermit as representing prudence. But be that as may, we have fortitude, we have temperance, right? And we have justice. We have three of the virtues. Temperance is about moderation, but it's about a moderation that has to do with some way of reconciling, mingling, combining, right? Finding the harmony between opposing forces. So it's another moment where the tarot is saying, okay, you've got your two horses. You've got your good horse. You've got your bad horse. You've got your two natures, the higher and the lower. You've got your two sides, the anima, the female, feminine, and the animus. How are you going to work with this world of duality? How are you going to work with this world of yes, no, good, bad, heaven, hell, right? And Temperance is offering a vision of that in terms of what becomes understood as moderation. Now, moderation isn't very popular. It's not a very sexy notion. Like, in part, I think because the interpretation of moderation tends to, it tends to evoke like crusty old, killjoy, stick in the mud, dampening of creativity. Reactions to this card, I don't know very many people who say that Temperance is their favorite card. I think more of us share. Kasha is really funny on this. I can't remember what video she talks about this at Tarot Map. She talks about Temperance, I think, is her soul card, and she says, she never finds Temperance cards that are interesting. They're all really kind of dull. And then Maggie Stiefvater, which she says in the Raven's Prophecy Tarot, she says, I used to hate getting this card in a reading. I didn't know how to read it. Actually, that's not true. I knew exactly how to read it. I just didn't like it. I don't much care for moderation or tempering my interests or maintaining a healthy balance between work and play. I like zeroing in on a project, she writes, and then going full throttle until either my body breaks down by the side of the road or I get to the end of my project. Okay, this idea of tempering our interests, of like tamping ourselves down. If moderation is that seems, not so compelling, right? Who wants to temper one's life force? Who wants to temper and tamp down? And incidentally, the word tamper and the word temper, or the word tamp, might be etymologically related to temper, to temperance. But the card Temperance isn't really talking about constraining our impulses. In this way, it's offering a different version of what it means to work with opposing forces, what it means to work with division within oneself, with the fundamental duality of this birth in mortal form. it talks about working with that in a way that actually is really fundamentally different from anything we've seen before in the tarot deck. You know, we've seen images of restraint, right, with the charioteer. We've seen images of weighing with the scales, the balance, of justice. We've seen images of the lady with the lion either holding shut, again, an image of restraint, or maybe prying open, an image of control. In short, we've seen lots of ways in the deck up until now in which the reaction relationship to our own dual natures has to do with control mastery, has to do with restraint, with curbing one's impulses, right? And then we came to death, death with his scythe, that offered the possibility of a transformation that entailed recognizing some of the trade-offs of our life, that entailed recognizing the importance of surrender. So some modern commentators have talked about temperance, have talked about this card in terms of the Buddhist notion of the middle way. Barbara Moore's commentary in her book for her steampunk tarot talks about temperance in terms of kind of right effort, and she invokes the Buddhist notion of the Eightfold Noble Path. What does it mean to find a kind of rightness? And in fact, in the tote deck, art, okay, so Crowley's version of temperance, art, the sort of alchemical, the alchemical combinations that he brings into this card. Key word for him is in the Latin tag here, rectifando, rectifying. So he's talking about what it means to work with the interior depths and sort of external manifestation through a kind of process of rectifying, of rectification. And that rectifying is the same word as the word right. Right? The word right comes from that same word, to rectify, to make things right, to rectify things. That notion of rightness, of the right path, of finding the right path, that is really very much, I think, at the heart of this card. It's how I understand the way in which the card of Temperance is a card about practice, about an ongoing kind of perpetual effort, an ongoing orientation to the world. But here's the thing about the notion of rightness in Buddhism, or the notion of the middle way in Buddhism. So people will talk about the middle way, and they'll talk about from the story of the historical Buddha's own life. You know, he spends his first 3 decades basically hanging out in the lap of luxury, giving in to sensual pleasures, giving into this body, this incarnation, and all of the delights of the material world. He does that because he doesn't know any better. And then he wakes up to the truth of suffering. He's like, look, I can enjoy pleasure as much as I like, but that will not, no matter how many walls I create, how much I fortress myself in, how much I try to protect myself, I will be subject to sickness, age, and death. And so he leaves his castle, he leaves his palace, he leaves the sensual world, and he spends 6 years in deep ascetic practice, you know, flagellating the flesh, working on self-mortification, on repressing, ascetically repressing, restraining his embodied nature. So he goes from one extreme to the other. And famously, the origin of Buddhism, when he sits down under the Bodhi tree in order to find the answer to suffering, he finds a middle path, neither just giving in to the temptations of this body, heart, and mind in this moment, nor repressing them. So the middle path is often thought to be like, let's just go down the middle, like the Goldilocks path. But that's not right either. It's not finding a middle way between two opposites. It's instead much more what Osho Zen Tarot talks about in its version of the Temperance card in terms of integration. It's a mingling. It's a combining. It's saying that the relationship between opposites is not to choose one or the other, not to restrain one, not to play with the reins on the charioteer. The solution is about integration. It's about mingling. It's about, this is the Royal Fez Moroccan Tarot. It's about pouring from one vessel to the next. It's about the active mingling of the waters of life. It's about fluidity. It's about the cups, ultimately. And that's another point to note, that in many ways the four cardinal virtues map onto the four minor suits. So here we have Temperance holding her cups, and I'll talk more about that when I get into the minors. So coming back to the gill, what I love about this card is the way in which the angel figure is in motion. This act of temperance is an act, it's a movement, it's a practice. The mingling of opposites is something that we work with. We work to find balance moment by moment. We're never going to be in one place where we've balanced the competing impulses in our life, where we're like, okay, I'm done. I'm done. I balanced it all. Instead, this is ongoing, energetic work. And it's holy work. It's holy work. And it's a kind of work, that signals, I think, our most profound connection to the sacred and the divine. And that's symbolized in this sign of the covenant from sort of biblical mythology, the rainbow that emerges after the flood. So that's this holy work of temperance. As someone who is always going to extremes in her own life, her own heart, her own mind, this card, upside down, right side up, this card is reminding me to just keep practicing, to not lose faith, to hold on to my birthright, which is a birthright of peace and abundance, a birthright of wholeness. All right, that's all I got this morning. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for your practice.